joining me is my chair from the House, Chair Justin Woodson. I want to introduce you.
Good afternoon, Senator. Good to be here with you today, and I look forward to having the discussion.
Thank you. And your representative?
Hi, afternoon, Representative Gannon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I believe we have online our Department of Education officials. Have they checked in?
We're on, Senator.
Dr. Kishimoto?
Yes, Senator. Would you like me to get started?
Yes, thank you. I don't know if you had an opening remarks you wanted to make, Dr. Kishimoto, before we start with the questions.
Thank you, Senator, and to the Joint Committee. The request to us was to put some slides together to give an overview based on the three areas that you wanted us to cover. And so I have some support to show our slide deck. We'll run through that and then be open, of course, for questions. I'm actually at Olamana School. They're having the graduation in a short time here, and I'll be joining them to confirm graduation, their diplomas. So aloha, Chair Kidani, Chair Woodson, and members of the committee. I'm Christina Kishimoto, Superintendent of the Hawaii State Department of Education. Thank you for inviting us to join you to provide an update on where the Department of Education is in its transition from mostly a distance learning approach to a full reopening that we're planning for. With me today is my leadership team. Phyllis Unabasami, Deputy Superintendent, Heidi Armstrong, Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Student Support Services, and Rochelle Mahoy, Complex Area Superintendent of Farrington Kaiser Kalani Complex Area, to help provide responses to your questions. So I'm going to start on slide 2. Again, mahalo for the opportunity to update the committee on the department's plans to address the needs of our students. We have prepared high-level presentation on the following 3 topics that were requested of us: summer learning opportunities, learning loss, and school reopening plans. So if we go from slide 2 to slide 3. For the upcoming summer, the department is going to be offering a comprehensive summer learning program to provide students of opportunities for credit advancement, credit recovery, enrichment, intervention, remediation, and transition. Currently, we have 252 schools that are offering a summer learning program. Our summer learning, this is going to be our largest and most extensive summer learning program that we've ever provided. Our summer learning programs target support for vulnerable learners who have exhibited the need for additional support. We're prioritizing students who have fallen behind in their grade level, students who are transitioning from one grade span to another. For example, 6th grade graders going into their middle school or 8th graders going into high school, and students who need support re-engaging in the school setting. One of the actions the Board of Education took was to approve funds so that students do not need to pay for summer school this year, knowing that there are lots of challenges that our families have, and also to encourage filling of all of our summer school seat offerings. On slide 4, you'll see that the department's going to be offering multiple opportunities for summer learning. We begin on the slide deck with the official summer school, which provides students with opportunity to earn credit for recovery or advancement for traditional academic courses and programs offered at school sites for grades K through 12 and via eSchool for grades 9 through 12. We are offering 16 official summer schools, summer school sites this summer. Where we have the huge expansive area is through the summer learning hubs, which are designed at the school or complex area based on needs and may provide opportunities for remediation or credit recovery, intervention, transition supports, and enrichment. And examples of enrichment would be camps such as sports camps, STEM, music, arts, programming, etc. So this summer, the department's going to be operating 252 summer learning hubs. 166 of them are at the elementary school level, 38 at the middle school, 33 at the high school, and 15 at our combination schools. The third offering is specialized student support programs, which are provided during the summer for students needing specialized services and supports. So these programs include extended school year or ESY, English learner extended learning opportunities, special support programs for students with disabilities, and alternative learning programs. Those have multiple sources of funding that are appropriate for the students being served. The last two is the accelerated learning programs, which are designed to advance learning in targeted subjects for a targeted student population. And then we have college, career, and community learning, which includes transitions and on-ramp programs, summer internships sponsored by the state office or arranged by the school. So these programs are targeted for high school students who are preparing for post-secondary education and careers. So let's go to the next slide. Our summer learning programs are part of the department's larger efforts to address the learning loss that resulted from the closure of our school facilities and the shift from in-person learning to virtual hybrid learning over the past 14 months. The Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act passed by Congress specifically identified addressing learning loss as an allowable use of the Elementary Secondary Education Emergency Relief, or ESSA 2 funds that were allocated to the state education agency. The American Rescue Plan, or ARP, certainly amplified the nationwide concern for learning loss by requiring states and local education agencies to address learning loss. So as a unified state and local education agency, the department is required to dedicate a minimum of 23% of ESSA 3 funds to address learning loss. An additional 1% each for summer school and for enrichment programs and comprehensive after-school programs also are part of our required programming to address learning loss. So let's go to slide 6. You'll see a slide, I believe we shared this last time, that just shows the continuum. I think one of the things I want to note is that when we talk about learning loss, we're not going to address the learning loss from a year of distance learning and interrupted learning in one summer. This is really about the next 2 summers and the next 2 school years, monitoring the data very carefully and ensuring we have multiple approaches to reach students. And so as an update to the information that we provided in January and April, we've increased in-person learning at our at schools during Q4, and we plan to begin the upcoming school year with full in-person learning. A distance learning work group that was co-led by a CAS, a complex area superintendent, and one of our previous teachers of the year, also convened educators to talk about what we learned from distance learning approach and what we want to continue applying in our approaches. So while we're not going to be offering full distance learning moving forward into next school year, in order to focus our resources on full school reopening, we do recognize the value of continuing to develop distance learning options to address equitable access to course offerings, as well as to increase learning opportunities for students. So we'll take all the learnings that we've had, and we will continue to provide some offerings. The department is going into a process of seeking stakeholder input into how learning loss or what strategies should be used for learning loss mitigation, and that's part of the ESSA 3 application that we're accountable to. In addition to the summer programs mentioned earlier in this presentation, we're going to be hosting a summer start kindergarten transition program. So 88 elementary schools will be participating in this program. The summer athletics program for seniors also is going to be piloted with 10 high school campuses this summer. This will allow coaches to help prepare graduating seniors to participate in athletics at the collegiate level. And as we move into the opening of the 2021-22 school year, the department will complete its learning acceleration framework to provide guidance to schools, complex areas, and state offices on addressing learning loss and explore options for schools and learning loss mitigation, including student support services during the school day, as well as out of school time, which continues to be an important holistic approach. So we're gonna go to the next slide, slide 7. Again, we have shared this before. The department's going to continue to monitor our metrics based on the data the board required to monitor student progress through the 2021 school year. And so we have our third quarter metrics, and we will be updating this with year-end data in a few weeks. The data that's used to identify students in need of additional support right now are course marks or grades, high-risk attendance, and off track to graduation. So we go to slide 8. The BOE metrics regarding the quarterly marks of our elementary, middle, and high school students are currently based on third quarter data. And again, we saw that we have areas of concern and need and support for our students. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we are designing for not only the summer, but the summer next school year and the summer beyond that to provide all of those supports to students. If we go to slide 9, these are for students who are being targeted for remediation services. We're going to target students who are at risk of being chronically absent for in-person instruction to provide these students with the support services needed to successfully re-engage in schools. So high-risk attendance, metric 7, is an important metric. Then metric 8 on slide 10 is the off-track to graduation. So although our graduation season is certainly in full swing, many of our schools are holding in-person graduation commencement ceremonies, and we're very proud of them. Our final graduation data will not be available until July 2021 after we verify all of the student data. And so what you see there is our third quarter information. So this slide reflects our 12th grade data as of March 2021. So it's a snapshot. For school year 2021, about 26% of our 12th graders were off track to graduate. And as I stated, we'll have an update in July. We have 10,801 12th graders. 7,945 of them at the end of third quarter were on track. 2,856 students were off track. On track means that it's based on credits earned or in progress and not based on course grades. So seniors must not have any credits needed for graduation to be considered on track. All credits must be either earned or pending. If we go to slide 11, I'd like to talk about school reopening. On Monday, I did issue a letter to our parents announcing that the department will be returning to full in-person learning for all students for the school year 21-22, which commences what seems like right around the corner, August 3rd, 2021. We will be resuming co-curricular and extracurricular activities such as athletics, bands, clubs, and so forth. Updated health guidance allows us to increase in-person opportunities. We've already ramped up in-person instruction at our elementary schools during this final quarter of the school year and have reinstituted some of our athletics programs. Based on fourth quarter data, nearly all schools are either doing full in-person learning or blended learning. So most of our students have already been on campus for face-to-face learning for at least part of their school week. On slide 12, as we prepare to bring students back to our campuses full time, our schools are ensuring campuses and student support services have the needed capacity to accommodate all students. One of the challenges early on as we started planning for return of more students on our campuses was how to feed all students while adhering to COVID mitigation strategies. Fortunately, DOH has worked with us and advised schools that cafeteria concerns should not be a barrier to bringing students back to campus. You know, these are some photos of my recent visits onto campuses, and I've seen lots of innovative solution. you can see Kanoelani's elementary school, they started an outdoor solution for students to eat outside. One of the things I will note to you is that to do these alternative strategies does require additional adult support. And so many of our schools have hired part-time support to ensure that students follow safety procedures, are safe as they spread out in different areas around campus for their food service program. We've also worked with our bus companies to adhere to CDC and DOH guidance for transportation. Slide 13. We'll continue to work closely with DOH. As of right now, there are no updates to the CDC or DOH guidance for school settings, but the prior guidance still is appropriate and stands in place. We've been advised to continue enforcing 3 essential strategies to maintain safety. We will encourage students, families, and staff to remain at home if they're not feeling well. We will continue to mandate mask wearing, and we will continue to encourage all of our campuses to wash their hands, on all of our campuses, to wash their hands thoroughly and frequently. And as I go through school campuses, they have great protocols in place. We've also had a representative from CDC on some of our campuses who also confirmed that our protocols are very sound and in place. And DOH has also been to several of our campuses. So we will continue these mitigation strategies. Other mitigation strategies such as cohorting and physical distancing are considered secondary measures and are to be applied to the greatest extent possible under current guidance. And we know that some of those secondary measures certainly will be impacted by having all students back on campus. And so, but we will continue to follow DOH and CDC guidance. Let me talk on the next slide about where we are with vaccines, which I'm very excited about this opportunity we have to roll out student vaccines. And I know Senator Kadani, you were at one of our school sites issuing vaccines at Waipahu. Part of our effort to keep reducing the impact of COVID in our schools involves expanding the number of fully vaccinated individuals on our campuses beyond employees to include eligible students. We strongly encourage students and their families to take advantage of the added layer of protection with vaccinations more widely available, including for adolescents ages 12 and older, who make up roughly half of our student population. We currently have approximately 54,600 12 to 15-year-olds enrolled in our schools, and approximately 32,300 students who are at least 16 years old. With the authorization to administer the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine to children who are at least 12 years of age, the department has a total of approximately 87,000 students who are eligible for vaccinations. Again, vaccinations are highly encouraged, but they're not mandatory. The actual administrative authority for adopting or amending immunization requirements lies with the State Department of Health. This would include adding COVID-19 vaccines to the required immunization for students. I think you'll find the information on the next slide, also very interesting. On slide 15, the department began hosting vaccination clinics for students 16 years old and older on May 3rd. The first clinic that welcomed students was held at Waipahu High School. There is a 3-week waiting period between doses for the Pfizer vaccine, so many of our early clinics will administer a second shot before the end of this month. On May 10th, the FDA expanded the emergency use authorization for Pfizer to include 12 to 15-year-olds. So following the announcement and in adherence with CDC guidance, we began hosting vaccination clinics for students ages 12 and older last week, either directing younger students to existing clinics scheduled at nearby high schools or mass vaccination sites, or standing up clinics if there's enough demand and no other community clinics nearby. So the department has hosted 31 vaccination clinics since May 3rd, 21 in Oahu, 3 on Hawaii Island, 3 on Maui, and 4 on Kauai. At least 14 additional vaccination clinics will be hosted over the next few weeks. Eligible household members are also invited to get vaccinated with their enrolled students based on availability. So one of the things we're trying to do is not only invite the young person to come get vaccinated, but have the entire family come in, as long as they're 12 years of age or older. Next slide, out of school time partners, and I'm wrapping up with this slide. In closing, I do want to thank our out of school time partners who've provided critical services to our students and families throughout this year. You can see the team that's been available and has done yeoman work with us. They are and they will continue to be an integral part of our efforts to address the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. In addition to our out of school time partners, we have a number of other partners that will be working with schools across our state as the school year fully reopens, including a number of partners that are attached to our academies at the high school and a part of our after school care and so forth. So thank you for this opportunity to provide this information. We have the team available to answer questions. So mahalo.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that, for the slides and for giving us additional information. We also asked the Department of Health to provide us updated information for the reopening of schools, and have, as of this date, not received anything from that. I do hope that they are working on something that we can get sooner than later. I did want to point out one interesting thing that you brought up on the May 3rd vaccination. The first vaccination site at high school was at Waipahu High School. And besides the community, and it was very, very well received, but besides the community and the students who were able to get vaccinated, what I was really impressed about was that some of the people giving the shots were the students who had graduated from Waipahu High School's health program last year. And their assistants were the students that were in the health program who are seniors at Waipahu High School this year. So I'm also, really enthused about the academies that are going on in our high schools also. So thank you for that, Dr. Kishimoto. Representative Chair, do you want to start with questions?
Sure. Members of the House, are there any questions? Who wants to start off? Anyone have questions? I shall start. Okay, Vice Chair Cabela.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Kishimoto, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. This one actually relates to House Bill 613 that contains approximately $109 million to address learning loss. You did cover a little bit of this in your presentation, but at the same time, I know that the department currently does not have any way of funding certain priority items like the teacher shortage differentials. At yesterday's Board of Education meeting, you said that House Bill 613 should be considered a form of stakeholder engagement because the DOE is required to get feedback from stakeholders before submitting its plans on how to use the ESSER funds to the federal government. You said that the DOE is required to abide by federal requirements which supersede state law. Can you clarify these comments about House Bill 613 since it carries such significant weight and significant appropriations to address learning loss and school reopening?
Thank you for your question, Representative. I don't want to be the one trying to provide some kind of legal interpretation of what needs to be reviewed here. So let me just start by being really clear about that. What I was indicating was that for the purposes of the federal application, the federal application does not ask for legislative input. It is an application process like other federal funding application processes, comes through the department that then goes to the board for approval. And the House Bill 200 and House Bill 613, which are the critical funding decision bills by the legislature, can be treated as one of the stakeholder engagements as part of that application process. So again, I'm not going to provide legal interpretation of, what really supersedes what, but if there is a conflict, which was the question that was posed to me, between something that shows up in a bill that becomes law and a federal application process to access funding, that discussion about federal versus state law will have to be determined with some kind of legal interpretation and input and discussion. But what I was really pointing to was that my role is not to provide that interpretation of that law. My role is to make sure that all of there's stakeholder voice, and those two bills allow me to use the conversations that legislature has had and those two bills as a way to have the legislature's work represented as part of stakeholder engagement, in addition to the voices we're adding with parents, community members, partners, and employees.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Can we just add to that, Superintendent, maybe you can give us the date that the application requirements are due and when you're planning to start the public engagement that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that question. Actually, public engagement is actually rolling out today and has either rolled out already or will be pushed out via our website even overnight. So I need to check on that. That's what we were staging that up for. And so it opens up and it'll be open for several weeks. The initial timeline that the USDOE set was June 7th. Because of the legislative session timeline and the timeline for our subsequent board meetings to have this discussion, we've asked the USDOE for a waiver to push the submission of the application back, because we couldn't start community engagement until the board meeting yesterday and until the session was done. So now that the input process will open, we'll spend the next few weeks getting stakeholder input, and then we'll pull a recommended budget and application for the board that will go to them on July 17th. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phyllis. Hopefully I'm doing this from memory. July 17th, and then, I'm sorry, June 17th, and then July 1st, it has to be submitted to the USDOE.
Thank you. Are there any senators online who wish to ask a question? If not, I will start with a question from the Senate side. Superintendent, you talked about the free summer school, and also you mentioned, did you say 16 summer school types? I wasn't quite sure what that statement that you made, but what I'm leading up to is that there seems to be a lack of clarity on what programs schools will be offering to students over the summer. So I wanted some clarification on who determines what programs are offered at each school, and what are some of the limitations or reasonings that restrict what each school can offer.
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying that the Board of Education has authorized me to have a summer school fund of $34 million in order to not have to charge our parents for summer school. We've had some programs that did have a fee to it in previous years, and some of those were optional programs. And so in order to build out a larger summer school offering across our schools, each school received through their complex area superintendent an allocation and planned their summer school. So I'm going to ask Kaz Mahoy to speak to, from the Kaz perspective, how she received that money and the work she did with her principals around what kind of offerings are in place in her complex area. Kaz Mahoy?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I represent Farrington, Kaiser, and Kalani complex area. I have 25 schools, including Hawaii School for the Deaf and Blind. And so I received probably close to $900,000 to run summer programs for our schools. So basically each school made a proposal, and this is kind of how I did it at my complex area, and it might be done similarly at other complex areas as well, but it could be done also a little bit differently too. So they knew that there was a finite pot of money available. And so each school kind of drafted a plan targeting, number one, in-person instruction, and then two, for the purpose of addressing learning loss. And so each drafted kind of like a plan to address those schools. But I am going to say that the biggest limitation is human resources, because it's been such a trying year that a lot of teachers just want a break, to be quite honest. And so we are limited by qualified teachers, because again, our emphasis has been on providing accelerated learning to some extent, right? And also not making it just about remedial work. We want it more engaging, right? And so that does require a lot more planning. And so, keeping all those things in mind, and really with those that struggled the most during the pandemic. So class sizes, while we're trying to maximize it, we're also trying to find a balance in size, right? So that they can get quality instruction. So I'm, to be honest, the 25 schools, 2 are what normally are official summer school sites, which normally, like how you think about enrolling students normally, there are 2. So now they are getting where they normally would charge somewhere of like $127 per student, are now, that's going to be free, right, for students. So they're enrolling in that way. And that's our more 2 of our high schools. So now they'll be covered for free. For one school, they didn't ask for any money at all. My 3rd high school didn't ask for any money at all, but they're running it through their own school funds. And then basically all of the elementary schools are having a program in which they're identifying students who struggled the most during the pandemic, and they're being invited back first before they open it up for others. And so each school are providing services for those for each of their students. One school, because of a lot of construction is going on, they're identifying students, but they're actually going to service them at another location. All 17 elementary schools did also apply for the kindergarten start funds. So they are going to try and run programs for their incoming kindergarteners. So that's an additional program. I would say only one school is doing distance, and that is Farrington High School. And they're doing it as credit recovery only, and they're paying for it out of their own school funds. But they are going to do a transition program for 9th graders. And that will be on campus in person to help the incoming 9th graders. So most of the middle schools and high schools are running some kind of transition program. But really the biggest barrier is finding highly qualified teachers, right? And we want the best teachers to be running these summer programs. So that's probably the biggest challenge. I hope that helps.
Thank you for that explanation, Kasma Hawai'i. I think, so I don't know if this is your question or the superintendent. So what data is the DOE using to determine which students are experiencing learning loss?
So for most of the schools, I mean, grade marks, attendance, and I'm gonna say in one complex area in particular, sorry, Representative Ganaden, there are more disadvantaged populations. There are some students in which we really lost touch with students during this pandemic for various reasons. And so those are the ones that are getting targeted first, right? Ones, definitely those that are missing or at risk of not being promoted are being targeted first. Probably course marks, grade marks, definitely attendance. Our special education students, that qualify for extended school year services, that's going on, that's as usual. But we are trying to bring back others that may have, that normally don't qualify for ESY services. They're being invited back too. And I do believe we had federal funds to support them, even if they're in the learning hub situation. And then, and usually our ELs. So it's really at each individual school, they kind of have a criteria, right? And keeping those things in mind, who were affected the most. Usually it's attendance, course marks, and some behavior. SEL is the biggest thing too. So we kind of know who's some of the kids that are on the radar that we need to socialize back quicker than August 3rd.
So
it
is
varies from
DOE
school to
yeah,
school.
So is the DOE, do they have a set accountability of how you're reporting learning loss, or is it by individual school? Is the data being reported at the state level? Because when they go to another school, I think all the schools are going to need to know what the learning loss of each student is.
So I know they're using Infinite Campus, which is our state reporting system for attendance and also for grades. But I think, to be honest, some of our programs, we're running 4-week programs, right? So we can take data, but in terms of, for those that are doing credit recovery or are getting some extended time to finish off what should have been completed in fourth quarter, maybe there's just a small minority group that are getting maybe incompletes that need to finish off. There are some that need to do full credit recoveries. So that data would probably be really easy to get. But for 4-week type programs, which is really all we could get for teachers to want to come back on a regular basis, because what we didn't want was teachers trading off. We wanted them to reconnect with one teacher during the summer. I think the data might vary. We could give MPs, MEs, but really for 4 weeks, I think we're going to have to look at it. I would suspect that it may vary from school to school and how we're assessing. And I think that's a conversation we're still working out at the state level as to what exact data. Is it attendance? Is it behavioral type data? Is it anecdotal data? But they are being targeted in various ways. So I think the measurements might vary.
And what about students that have IEPs? How are they being evaluated for learning loss?
So students with IEP, that's really left to the IEP team, right? Because that is, and AS Armstrong can chime in as well. We've been meeting with all of our students and families with IEPs throughout the year. Most of them, if they are being affected by COVID, there is kind of like a mitigation plan, a COVID plan, or they're adjusting their IEPs accordingly. But there is a standard of practice that they do progress reports if they're qualified for ESY. For those that don't qualify for extended school year normally, that is something that we are offering this year. And we do have additional funding. For example, maybe I qualify for special education services during the school year, but not normally during the summer. Schools can invite them back. And if they need additional adult supports or accommodations, we do have a small funding pot that can help do that we normally don't have during just like official summer schools. So there is an additional funding pot.
Thank you. So does the superintendent, you talked about, this, it's not going to happen over this year, but probably next summer also for, trying to take care of our learning loss issues. So what does the DOE have a plan to continue to address the learning loss?
Yes, so the board metrics are metrics that we will continue to track, which are metrics that show how our students are doing, and we'll be able to compare Q3 progress 1 year with Q3 progress the previous year and Q3 progress the next year. So that's on a school level, we can do that. We can do that by grades as well. Which is good data for us to have to see if there are particular ages or grades of students that are showing that they're struggling more. The students, for example, in the middle grades, in the adolescents, we're tracking very carefully because we know in the adolescence years, they are susceptible to positive and negative influences, and the school acts as an important support structure for the adolescents. And so knowing that students have been away from that stable school setting so long, we are very closely tracking certain groups of students. So we'll be paying attention to what's happening up and down the grades. At the school level, the schools are responsible, principals and those teams are responsible for tracking the students who are losing ground or lost ground over time because they have that academic history with that young person. So we do have clear metrics, that consistent metrics for learning loss for summer school was course grades and course marks, high risk attendance, and off track to graduation. And then schools with their CASs were talking about additional metrics that they tracked, and they tracked it also for subgroups of students, ELL, special ed, to see what was happening within subgroups of students as well.
Thank you. I believe our House members have questions.
Majority Leader Bellotti.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Superintendent. First, tremendous work that you folks are doing to really stand up summer school. I'll have to say, from my experience as a public school parent, I got a call from my elementary school asking if my daughter wanted to be enrolled in summer school or summer programs. And then my older daughter, who's in McKinley High School, was able to enroll. We're on a waiting list, but she was able to enroll in the e-school. So I think the broad array of choices people have is wonderful. I want to ask Senator Kidani's question a little bit differently. Both of my daughters still maintained and took tests during the school year. And I think, is that another tool that the Department of Education will continue to have to measure learning loss? And one last comment is that, I'm a person who believes there's value in testing. And this is exactly one of those instances, because we can actually see the gaps, maybe in broader ways, the gaps of where people might have been falling behind. Will that information be gathered from the testing that was taken?
Yeah, so we have two layers. One is the formative assessments, and Rochelle was, of course, for her complex area, checking in on her schools that they did their 3 formative assessments this year, leading to the end of the year, and then they did the Smarter Balance assessment this year. So last year, the entire nation essentially had a waiver from that statewide assessment for good reasons. This year, schools, even though most of the students were still doing distance learning or blended learning, did a great job of scheduling their students to come in. And in fact, I was at some school sites as kids were either being dropped off or picked up. And I think the most amazing, I have to say this on the side, right? The most amazing thing was what the cafeteria staff did to make sure that the kids who were learning on campus could still eat in their way that they were set up, but that the kids that were coming in for testing could come in and pick up a bagged lunch and take it home. So just all around, the support services, the safety nets to support testing to continue and still get that data. And we'll look at that data based on the situation we're in. How many students with interrupted time and lost time, attendance issues, how did they do, and so forth. So we'll certainly triangulate that data with other data we have on that students, and we'll be able to tell a story about what learning loss really means and looks like, because it's not one measure. You've got to look at all of those measures. So yes, assessments are key.
And I would just add, so every year, I know that as a parent, I get like one of those full 4-pager SBAC assessments that tells me where my child is. And I actually keep those because frankly, those are better than the report cards. It really shows the progress over time. And so I think that is a very important tool to have to know where the progress of our students are. And so I think that's the individual level, but then you guys can break it out and build upon it to know what cohorts are missing. So I just want to commend you on that, and to keep that information flowing to the parents is really critical. I have other questions, but I can defer at the moment. I have another set of questions on early learning.
Okay, Representative Gannigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Senator Kishimoto and Complex Area Superintendent Ms. Mahoy, thank you so much for the work that you've been doing over the year. We've been saying it often, but it's been tremendous work in this year. I'm concerned about the information that you shared on slide 10, noting that 26% of 12th graders statewide are off track to graduate. That's a pretty significant percentage, 1 out of 4. And I'm assuming, although it's just in a slide here, if we were to disaggregate that data, it would disproportionately affect Title I schools, certain historically underserved communities like the Farrington complex, which I represent. I'm wondering what the plan is to help these. I'm also assuming this number is in reference to 11th graders going into 12th graders, so those who would graduate 2022. So I'm wondering kind of what the DOE's plan is moving forward. Also taking note of Ms. Mahoy's comments that you're limited by qualified teachers. This is an unprecedented year. And so wondering what we should do, whether or not this would be a time where the state should be considering outside contractors, expanding IEPs, expanding work plans. What is the plan to get us past this 26% number?
So I'm going to back into this question, Representative, just to share that so we're limited in terms of human capacity or human capital, I should say, for the summer because teachers are not mandated to teach in the summer. And we do have the opportunity, though, to start thinking about whether there are students that need additional time in very different ways. Again, not sitting in class doing the same thing, but how do we engage them or re-engage them in very different ways? And those are all part of the discussions we're having. The 20%, 26% off track, that's a data point we've been tracking all along. And we know that students may have been doing really well on most of their courses, and this represents also the student that only was doing that needed to catch up on one course, and we have students who were not doing well across their courses, right? So we have students with various levels of needs. So yes, every school, every high school was tracking their students and knew exactly the names of each students. Were reaching out, had reach out plans to them, engagement plans, additional time. Our high schools invited the students who needed the most support to come back for in-person either learning or part of their schedule back on campus to do more face-to-face support with counselors and so forth. We have a number of programs going on, including additional time in the summer to catch up or to finish up credits. We also have counselors that are working this summer through the University of Hawaii in a partnership with us who are engaging them for counseling support. Students also have the opportunity to start taking college credits over the summer. It's a great way to, again, encourage them and let them see that, yes, they can be ready for college. They need to be present and there will be support when they're present. So there's a number of opportunities for some of our students who have had, who did complete their graduation requirements, but have their college or jobs interrupted. We have the internship program. So again, we're trying to maximize all the opportunities there are to support students. But where students need extra time to earn credit, they're being given that support to get extra time and credit. And Kaz Mahoy is on, she can also speak to that. Phyllis Unubasami, who's the deputy superintendent has also been working with the 15 complex area superintendents around this monitoring and working with the high schools. If you have additional questions, they can certainly answer with more detail.
Redirecting to Ms. Mahoy, if she has anything to add.
I would say that's accurate in terms of, just to qualify my statement, it's just during the summer. We're very limited because teachers are not required to teach. So to run quality summer programs, we just need quality teachers. And after this year, I think a lot of people just need a break. We're even telling our principals, like I'm trying to tell my principals, I don't want you running your summer program. You need to actually start ramping up for reopening school for all kids. So if you can designate a director to help you run your summer program. So that's where I'm just saying that we're limited in the summertime on human capital. In terms of the 12th graders off track, I can just say I went to, one of my high school graduations, and the principal and I were talking about how many exactly didn't make it this senior class. And he said 60. And this is my larger high school. However, he said that during the credit recovery time and during the summer, he anticipates about 50 of them can complete their, and finish. They just couldn't do it by graduation date, right?
Oh, if you're gonna do that over the summer, do you have the
So
staff?
that's more like 10% for that school. So it's not 26%. So as that metric kind of, just to give you a little bit of a comparison.
Do you have the staff to help those 50?
Yes.
Students? Or is contracting necessary?
It's hard for us to contract because, to be honest, for the kids that are disengaged, you want them to be with familiar adults rather than unfamiliar adults. So I know that metric was taken before March 6th or something like that. So that's before spring break. And since then, I think it's probably changed. We just haven't updated it. That was kind of a marking period, right? And where everybody starts a little bit cracking the whip and, right, telling kids how, get it in, right? Salvage what you can for third quarter, working hard on fourth quarter, and the message always was, finish strong, right? And so but I wanted to give you a little bit of reality that there's about 10% at one of the particular high schools that, they didn't get it done by the time graduation, but more confidently, like it will come down to maybe, maybe 1% that can't finish it out. So it's just, I'm going to admit, a little bit all over the pages here, right? And I agree with, we do have data, schools do, right? We do use, just other than course marks, we do have formative assessments, universal screeners. We do use, and like Dr. Kishimoto said, we do triangulate our data. Some of it is lag data, such as our state testing, right? But that gives us pictures of where we're at. But real-time data, we do try and use that to make our day-to-day decisions and identify people quickly. But it has been a tough 15 months, right? So the mantra for FKK, the fourth quarter, was get as many kids back as you can, maximize your learning spaces, do what we can. It was always kind of this build back up from shutting down completely in first quarter to adding more kids all year long. And with that, teachers had to adjust their instruction, how we deliver instruction, right? And train and retrain. And so going into the summer, while I'd like to be optimistic and say, everybody, we all want our kids back. We all want to see our kids back, everybody, every day. I mean, that is what feeds our soul as educators, but it's just been tough, right? So we have to keep in mind the adults too, to refuel them so that they're really great come August 3rd when kids are back. So
And if I can just jump in, this is Deputy Superintendent. Representative, I would Casmahoy is alluded to that, is that the July 1st drop of the high school graduation rates, it's going to be more accurate in terms of how many students are making it, did make it and didn't make it. We use the rest of the summer to help students who have incomplete to get completed, because for many of them, it might be a credit, half a credit, and we are using credit recovery as a mechanism for getting the students done. They have gotten this far, they've earned up to the senior mark. And so we know that we just got to get them over the finish lines. For some, it takes a little bit longer. So every high school, it knows who the students are. They have profiles on them. They know what course they need to pass. And so they will do everything they can. And July 1st is actually the most accurate date. From now till graduation ceremony, they still have another, for many of our schools, they had 2 more weeks of school in order to get their high school diploma. They might not have walked in the graduation, but they still can get their high school diploma. And then they have for those that still need extra time, it goes into the summer. And then they will have, until we have to change our system over to a new school year, they have that time to get the credit for that course.
From now until August.
Yeah, not August, some late July, mid July, late July. I don't know exact date, but there's that time where we have to switch the system.
Okay, short window of time then. Thank you so much for your work.
Vice Chair Capella.
Thank you, Chair. I have a kind of a comment. I was looking at your the links that you folks put into the about summer learning. 25 of the schools, there's 25 schools that are going to be having summer school programs. So I'm actually not sure if Dr. Kishimoto is the perfect person to answer this question, or maybe A.S. Armstrong. Only 3 of the schools are going to be on a neighbor island out of that 25. And that seems very inequitable. And none of the schools are going to be on Hawai'i Island, where my district is. So I am a little bit concerned about that. I know that I did look at the summer learning hubs that you folks spotlighted as well, but they're, none of the information is actually on there specifically about when it's going to start, what's going to happen, what the programming is going to look like, or how people can apply or how their kids can apply. When I looked at the website for Konawana High School, which you folks recommended that we do, the website at the high school refers back to the DOE site. So I'm just a little bit concerned about whether or not that's equitable for just kids that are suffering and struggling on the neighbor islands. And when we're talking about learning loss, I know that Kalihi was mentioned, but there are portions in my district that are so impoverished we don't have running water. So the inequitability is really a concern for me. And I was wondering, because something that would make things a lot more equitable, bringing it back to House Bill 613 one more time, if the DOE has thought about or is willing to use a portion of learning loss funding to continue teacher shortage differentials, because I know that that was something that was really important. And we talk a lot on this conversation about just the need for highly qualified teachers, and the differential shortages are one of the biggest ways that we've been able to keep these highly qualified teachers in very rural areas like the one that I live in. So if anyone could answer that, that would be really great.
So I would just highlight, Representative, that the majority of the switch has been to go from official summer school that is focused on a more traditional approach to credit attainment and credit recovery to these learning hubs, which you can still get credit recovery, original credit, but it's also allows for a lot more innovation around how you engage kids and adding in this other type of unique programming, doing it through a STEM approach, an art approach, a music approach, INA-based learning, and doing all kinds of very interesting things. And so we have 252 sites doing that. That includes all of our neighbor islands. So you may be looking at the data that is on the official summer school site, but it's probably because your Big Island has replaced it with summer learning hubs. Big Island actually has on the Hilo and Kona side, all over Big Island has last summer started learning hubs in very interesting ways. And so they were ready to expand it there. But all of our islands have summer school offerings across schools. The schools that don't have it primarily are schools that have construction going on. And so students are, some schools have joined up with other schools so that the other school is offering the site and the staff are going over to run their summer programming over there. But we do have programming across all islands, quite intense programming across all islands. So I'm not sure if that's what answers that. And then the different,
Sorry, my question specifically on that was that it's very difficult to find information on how a parent can enroll their child. Because when I look at the schools specifically, it refers back to the Summer Learning Hub information on the DOE website. So there's no actual information for parents to be able to enroll their kids. So I'm just trying to find the best way, I guess, then I would be able to inform my own constituents on how they can have their kids get the same help for the Summer Learning Hubs, I guess.
And I would just respond as I'm scanning through my colleagues' programming. I'm peeking at the Big Island, and it does look like every school is having something. So I think on the official summer school, there's 25 across the state, but they do have, as Dr. Kishimoto said, learning hubs going on. But just like FKK, they may be limited in the number of students we can serve. So for us, if we can open it up to all, we're opening at certain sites, you can open it up to all, and some we can't just because we don't have enough personnel to open it up to everybody who wants it. So it might be as invites only, and that's why it might not be on their website, I might suspect. But I would say the response to your constituents would be to contact the school directly.
Yeah, since each school was doing their summer learning hubs and we allowed them that innovation space, it's not centralized. It's hard to spend time centralizing that in the middle of trying to roll out lots of programming. So I think we encourage folks to use their website. Some probably did better than others. And then the differentials questions that you asked, I think you're talking about the teacher differentials we have in place this year. The board did vote back in February to continue those differentials for next year. And so teachers who are receiving those differentials and teachers who are moving new into those shortage areas, hard to fill areas, that letter on differentials, they already knew in February that that's going to continue based on board action. And then there's a letter we're sending out to teachers. It may have gone out this week already, that gives them all the information to confirm, yes, that's still in place. So I think that's your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. K.
Superintendent, can I ask for some clarification for, I think in response to both Representative Gandon and Capella, that if a student has learning loss and wants to apply for summer hubs, learning hubs, or summer school, do they have preference? Because in looking at some of the sites, I see that registration has been closed on some of the schools. And so what is their alternative when they get that message? Where do they call? Do they call the department's main line, or? Because you're saying that every school principal is kind of doing their own thing, but they can only apparently take so many students, as Hawai'i is saying, depending on how many teachers they have. So that being said, if there are students who have experienced learning loss, are they being taken before other students who want to come to some?
Yes, so that they're prioritized. Principals have sent out invitations to those children and families to the Ohana to indicate whether or not they're going to take those seats so that they know how many students are going to participate. Principals have done a great job of reaching out to make sure that parents not only know about the opportunity, but encouraging them that this is really important because their child really needs the extra time. But parents are, making those or responding to those. If there's anyone that is reaching out to you that's saying, I'm not sure what's available or whether I'm part of that group of students that has first access, they should be contacting their principal. And certainly every child has a teacher that's been attached to them this school year, so they can also reach out to teachers. But I would encourage parents to reach out to the principal.
Okay, thank you for that, Superintendent. I think this is a good segue into the reopening of the schools, because some of this depends on how much, again, staff they have that they can open the classrooms. And one of the concerns of parents was how are students, or actually for some of the principals I've talked to, is how are students going to be able to, have lunch? Are they going to be eating at their classroom desk, or will they be served as usual during school hours, regular school days, in the cafeteria?
So the school lunch and breakfast, certainly all schools have had a lot of practice this year on using a variety of alternatives to how to provide meals, and have bought tools to provide barriers, to provide makeshift kind of desk or tables where they can reset up somewhere else or sit outside with cushions for each child and so forth. As we go into the school year, each school is going to, based on their space and the number of lunch waves that they're going to have, will have to communicate what meals will look like for their child's site. So the school is going to be the best source of information for what that particular school is going to be doing. But meals still will be provided, and we're going to make the best accommodations as possible. It's worked this year, but it's been hectic. And once all students are back, it's only going to be more hectic as we start out for the first few weeks and try out new protocols that the schools will put in place, again, to continue to have students. It'll be any combination of additional lunch waves, eating in classrooms, having some kids eat outside. And they've done it all kinds of ways, with allowing privileges for the older kids, or, making it fun where the younger kids get a turn to eat outside. And they've done all kinds of things. And so they'll continue to work hard on this.
Will students be allowed to continue doing virtual learning should they not want to come to summer school?
So I think you're talking about the school year, not summer school, right?
No, I'm talking about summer school, because
Okay.
that especially, those who have learning loss and need to come to summer school to make up their grades. Will they be able to do virtual if the parents do not feel the school is safe enough to reopen?
So not necessarily. With the limited resources that we're going to have to try to get as many teachers teaching, the priority is for in-person learning. We know we've lost a lot of face time with students, and that's had an impact on engagement. We also have behavior information that tells us, or social emotional data that tells us that students are increasingly sad, feel disconnected. And so we're prioritizing in-person learning for the summer. There are some opportunities for distance learning, but again, it's a matter of capacity to do all things. We're not going to be able to do all things, but we are prioritizing in-person learning. And Rochelle, is there anything you want to add to what I just said?
No, I think that's accurate. We are prioritizing in-person learning. I have one school, and by name, you can see it's unique, is HSDB, that we are going to allow for blended learning because we have students on the neighbor islands. And so, and really for learning a visual language, and a visual language being the language of instruction, that isn't optimal, right? Because you lose connection and you're losing some communication. And so, however, being connected with their family is important too. So we are doing it as blended. So parents do have that option, but that's pretty much the only school that's being done for. And I agree with Dr. K. If they are suffering from learning losses, it's typically the ones who haven't been in person. So we are encouraging in person.
We do through grades 9 through 12 have e-school, and we have some of those opportunities that the high schools are providing for students who can be successful in earning their credit via, distance learning. And some of that is synchronous, some of that is asynchronous. So it depends on, again, capacity for the number of offerings.
Superintendent, on the amount of students that have learning loss, particularly the 26% in the one complex area, or one school, I'm sorry. Was there any information given as to the cause of the learning loss? Was it because they were virtual and could not do virtual, did not have the devices or the connectivity, or some other factor? For instance, for many of the athletes who needed to get a certain grade point to be able to play, also had the chance to have tutoring. So if that was not available, then maybe that is part of it. But I just wanted to know if there was any data taken as to the causes of the learning loss.
Well, I think we're going to, over time, be able to do further analysis of all the inputs to learning loss. The national discourse is around how to capture that research and that analysis. What we're doing is looking at the conditions for learning. If you're missing instructional time, that's certainly one of the conditions that will impact students' learning time. If students are inconsistently attending, so there's a number of impact areas. It's really too early to do a full analysis, but we certainly know what some of those inputs are in terms of inputs to impact quality access to learning time. And so we'll get further into that data in time, but I think that's very difficult to capture fully right now. Although we do know what data points we're tracking in that area. I will say that from the technology access and connectivity, there was a lot of work done on that, and we didn't report on the data. It is very, very low. It's under 1% for, I believe, technology access, and under 3% for connectivity access. So we went from a district that that had optional technology to one-to-one technology across the entire state. So quite a lift. I'm pretty proud of what everyone did to make that happen. That doesn't mean that all the connectivity was optimal, nor the families who realized that they probably had the wrong device, even though they said they didn't need a device from us. And so we had to change up the supports during the year. So we're going to get better and better at that. So it's not to say that aspect didn't have an impact. It certainly had an impact early on, especially as families realized that they didn't have enough bandwidth to have 5 people on the same Wi-Fi, and we needed to provide those additional supports. But that's a statewide challenge, and I know that we're working on that, and I really appreciate all the hands that are really working towards that piece. But in terms of the in-depth analysis, we'll keep looking at that data and providing more information analysis on it.
And Superintendent, to clarify, for the next school year, when school reopens, and you're saying there's going to be a full reopening of schools, will there still be opportunities for virtual learning at that time?
They will be. I'm going to toss this to Phyllis Unubasami, and I'm going to be back in 30 seconds. Phyllis, can you answer that question?
Sure. Hi, this is Deputy Superintendent. There's 2 things to clarify. Number one is that the in-person learning is the priority. We know that the students will do much better if they are in class in front of an effective and caring teacher. And so that is our first priority. For students, for whatever reason, there might be that some kind of issue that it might make it challenging to be able to come back to school. For us, it's that there is a seat for every student to be in person. And then for cases, case by case, if there are students and the family wants to work with their principal to take a look at different ways of providing alternative educational opportunities, that can be discussed. But right now, our goal is to get them back in school. We may have, none of the schools are going to be required to do distance learning. They are required to open in person. And then some schools may be able to offer virtual learning as part of their school design, but it is not a requirement in every school.
Okay. The reason I ask is that I'll use Mililani Middle School for one. They're a 4-track school,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of concerned as to, they do have a new building coming up, but it's not ready. It
Yeah.
won't be ready for the new school year.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how that will work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one concern. The other concern I have heard from parents is that the 5th graders that are going into the 6th grade, into middle school, now the Department of Health is recommending vaccinations for 12 years old and older. But middle school students from 5th grade are still, some of them are still 11 years old. So they're not being vaccinated. They will be, in school with all these other students that have been vaccinated. I mean, which is a good thing, but still they could still be carriers, etc. So how is that going to work? Would they, if the parent is concerned, will they still be able to do virtual learning?
So let me start with in person first. Is that it's really important to that the vaccination, and that's why we've prioritized a lot of effort in terms of making sure as soon as we could that we were vaccinating 12 plus students. We're very aware that there are students that are going to come to age 12 at the end of summer, and we were thinking about how do we do that vaccination again, for the reason that there will be students who might be going into middle school who are still not age 12 and eligible for the vaccination. That's why we're continuing to do the core essential strategies, even though you know the CDC is making starting to roll back some of their guidance around this. But however, the department is planning to continue to use the mitigation strategies because of that worry that some of our students will still not be able to get vaccinated when the school year starts. And so for that reason, while we are making that effort to offer the vaccination, we're going to continue to hold on to the core essential strategies, which we have found to be effective over this past school year.
Thank you for that. And I think one of the things we talked about earlier was the cafeteria
Yes.
issues. So if they're fully reopening, and many schools I know of now have 3 or 4 lunch bells because they have more, a lot of students and not enough room. So how is that going to be handled? I realize that we were told that they can sit side by side if they have a plexiglass or something in between them. But I would think that that would require additional staff to clean the cafeteria, within 10 minutes or so for the next group to come in. So those are things that all have been worked out or need to be worked out.
If it's not been worked out this quarter, this past quarter, then it will be over the summer and it will be ready for the next school year. We know that in order to open in person, it is going to take extra effort. It is not going to be a normal operating year as in other years. We are going to be cautious. We know that even if COVID is no longer in play, there's still the after effects of worry, right, that we're going to deal with. And so it's really important that as we think about powering down our strategies to do it very thoughtfully. So we know that when we open up our schools and we open up our cafeterias for food service, that there is going to be caution that we're going to take to make sure that even though we may feel that it's no longer needed, we may use it for a little while longer just to make sure that we're taking care, which means that we will have to put extra resources into that effort in every school.
Thank you. Chair, I have more questions, but I know that your members still have questions, so I will yield for now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Majority Leader Bellotti.
Thank you, Chair. First, kudos to the department and the partners for standing up the mass vaccination centers. I think knowing that Pfizer has said that they may have the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds by as early as end of summer, I'm hoping that the infrastructure you folks did for standing up these centers will be able to be replicated for the elementary schools, because I think that's going to be so critical. My question actually is as to the loss mitigation timeline on slide number 6. And I really appreciate the department's view of this as addressing loss mitigation over time. And really, you're going to be having to work with these groups of kids over a 2-year period. It's just going to be that way for a whole generation of students across the nation. I'm really interested in that portion on the Summer Start Kindergarten Transition Program. I know that because of the disruptions in the early learning setting, that a lot of parents may not have been signing up. So I'm curious, based on the enrollment numbers pre-COVID and the enrollment numbers now, did we see a tremendous drop in the enrollments for kindergarten? And can you speak to that? And then what are the strategies the department is going to employ to make sure that the kindergartners, as a large group, we really need to get them into the school? I don't know who that question should be directed to.
So yes, we certainly saw a drop in kindergarten, and actually that drop, as I talked to my colleagues across the nation, was nationwide. The really important thing for us is it's making sure we find the kids who didn't go to pre-K, didn't show up for kindergarten, and are going to try to enroll for the first time potentially in first grade because they didn't have a sibling that was already on our radar in the system. So we know we may have some kids like that. The majority of kids are the ones that stopped out and said that they were going to do homeschooling, or they were going to go to another program. Again, we don't know the quality of what they received and whether they fully engage, whether it's in homeschooling and whether the parents had the full resources or utilized the resources and so forth. So we know families had all kinds of struggles during this time. And so we know that as the kids transition back, that we're going to have to very quickly assess the early reading skills and reading readiness skills, which is going to be the most important skill to focus on as kids come in and show up for kindergarten. But the schools have been doing huge outreach out into community to reach out to families, to reach out to partners, to say, rising students who are going into kindergarten, coming to school for the first time, share their names or encourage the families to reach out and so forth. So we're going to have to keep hitting that hard throughout the summer to make sure we reach out to kids. And then we'll do some communications campaign in a broader way via media.
I hate to press, but is there a percentage number that we know in comparison to post-COVID and pre-COVID numbers of enrollment? Because I think if it's a large number, that will help us in our campaign to get parents to think about, hey, it is time now to sign your child up for kindergarten.
So it was significant. And Deputy, do you have the number offhand? I have so many numbers running through my head. I don't want to say the wrong number. Certainly don't want to over or understate it. So Representative, why don't I get back to everyone with the exact number? I know I shared it at one point because we've been talking about it all year, that we quarter by quarter, we've been tracking the students that started with us also and then were exited, and students who didn't start with us this year and we knew that they should have. So we do have that data.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll look forward
Absolutely.
to that information.
Okay, House members, any additional questions? The chair has some questions, so I'll keep the questions simpler today for the superintendent. And so you spoke about learning hubs back on slide, I think 4, as you illustrated it. And I'm wondering if you can go into a little bit detail as to how those learning hubs were set up and how they will operate.
Thank you, Representative. The learning hubs are set up by school based on the school designing the hubs for the students' needs. So they look at their own data and then design based on their data. And so those hubs can be hubs that focus on strengthening English language acquisition and having students have a lot more practice in the English language while building particular skill sets. It can be a hub that's focused on scientific inquiry. And so it's really about engaging students through scientific inquiry. It can be a hub that's on the arts and strengthening some math skills, but really using more of an arts approach. So it's really about the school having the opportunity to design based on where they had to meet the learning needs of their particular school students. And so it was not an across the board design, basically.
Thank you for that. We are receiving reports that per some of these hubs, technical difficulty here. We are receiving reports per some of these hubs that they are not being housed or they're not being accompanied by teachers. And so my question is, if in fact there's not a teacher in these hubs, how are students supposed to get the help that they need and to get back on track?
So there should be some opportunities for more sports camps and things like that, but those are being clearly identified as having some of these engagement opportunities, and there may be some of those that have partners engaged. I would need to look at whether there are any hubs that don't have a teacher attached. I know that we have some schools that are partnering with UH's teacher preparation program. So we have teacher prep candidates teaching at some of our learning hubs, which I think is a great partnership. But those are all being overseen by the principal or vice principal or teacher and so forth. So I think if there are some, any that you're hearing reports on that we need to check on, we certainly can do so. But unless Deputy has other information, we are really drawing from our internal staff to run those.
And I would add, sometimes it could be EAs, it could be PTTs that are usually casual hires during the school year that are also serving in those hubs. And so it is a matter of what is being offered and what's the appropriate level of staffing that is needed for that. If you have a specific concern about a specific site, we absolutely can look into it and give you back some information around it.
I'd appreciate it because that's actually different from what Dr. Kishimoto said. She had articulated that there's a certain level of rigor that's supposed to be happening in these establishments, and in fact, they should be placed with a educator or a educator in training. And so we're hearing that that's not actually happening at some of these schools. So I will relay to those schools that they should have teachers or teacher candidates in all of those classrooms. That's
Yes,
let me just clarify though, there are engagement learning hubs that are about students being re-engaged in schools through various means, whether that's some sports camps and so forth, and those would be appropriate to have someone that's not necessarily a certified teacher. So those engagement hubs certainly can have that. We don't have a learning hub that's focused on a core academic area that's being taught by someone that isn't part of the teaching staff.
Okay, thank you for
So I
that.
do want to differentiate between those two approaches.
Thank you for that. I want to go to slide 5. It says that there's 23% allocated for learning loss. Can you tell me how you came out with that number?
That percentage is a reflection of what's in the what is required by the ESSA 3. In order to have an approved application, you have to have 23% allocated to learning loss.
Is it 23% or is it 20%?
It's 23%. Yep.
It is 23%.
Yes, and there's, I think when we looked at House Bill 613, it was very close to what the feds required. I think it was off by a very, very small number, and we would just make that adjustment.
Okay, I have additional questions, but I'll turn it back over to the Senate.
Thank you, Chair. Superintendent, can I have you clarify when we were discussing those who left school to be homeschooled or left for another district or for whatever reason they left school, all of these were tracked and documented, and if they were homeschooled, were they monitored this past year? So we do have, data on them.
No, if they're homeschooled, we don't track them. We do track that they that the parent did file to homeschool them, so we know who they are.
Correct, but I guess why I'm asking is that should they be enrolled this next school year and you don't have any data, I don't know how you're going to place them or bring them into the summer learning loss program if they need it. And I guess my question was, did anyone reach out to them?
So Rochelle, do you want to speak to how the schools assess the students coming in? Because we do assess them upon reentry. And what are the data points they look at?
So we have been, when students upon reentry, so some students, when they had chosen to do full distance learning, we were still able to assess them using online programs. So when they came back in person, and actually our state testing, we were requiring everybody to be in person as well. So that's a data point. For going to your question about how do we know why they left or when they left?
But how do we assess them when they come back in from, if they went to homeschooling and show up again?
So, I mean, they would normally we have universal screeners, formative assessment. So they do them, but they're kind of like sequential. I mean, not sequential, they're kind of have a time frame in which they do it. So if not, teachers will do informal assessments if they don't know where they're at. So I can see it, because I would think those are more outliers, right? There's a few kids coming back at various times, and teachers would assess them, in an informal manner. And usually they have classrooms assessment or teacher made assessments, or they have standardized assessments, but they would do it individually to know where they're at. So that's going to be a hard data though to capture, maybe at the state level, because now we're talking about a subpopulation, right? A small subpopulation. Again, so.
But we don't have I mean, I didn't see the numbers on how many went out to be homeschooled and, what the, was it elementary, middle, or high school level? So I think if you have that information or can get it, I'd appreciate it.
We will send that report in.
Thank you. I yield to you.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I say something?
Senator Favela.
Thank you. Now, sitting here and listening to the area's representative and a lot what Senator Kadani was saying. Question to you, Superintendent. Knowing that we was coming to this point, and I know we had this slide similar previously, knowing that we was coming to this point, the data that you're giving us and the data that's on the sheet on rural islands and islands that is subject to summer school. I mean, I know sports are important, don't get me wrong. I played sports all my life. I know how sports is very important, but some of these kids need more than that. I listened to the neighbor island talking about students, and then you're saying going, and if you have the problem, talk to the principal. The problem is they call the principal, tell them to go to your guys' site where they get confused. So did anybody check all these sites out prior to the ending of this school year, knowing that these things would be operational and accessible to these rural areas and places where on the neighbor islands that they are having hard time with their educational either face-to-face or even distance learning? Because that's the problem that we've been having since we started with this whole pandemic, not knowing, having an outline or a structure coming from you, at least a basic 5, 6 maybe, to make sure that these things are working in place before we come to this point. Because I just heard you tell her if the families in her area having a problem, call the principal. That's the reason why they call the principal, and the principal tell them to go to the DOE website. And like how Senator Kadani was saying, some of these sites already is closed. School year not even ended. And some of these guys need way more input. And then the families that is working out there that cannot be on the computer or checking the email or whatever, and then realize, hey man, school is almost ending. My kid needs a little bit more encouragement or maybe a little bit more work. And then they go ahead and take the time to go on the computer and look at the DOE website, get frustrated. You know, everybody has time is an essence today for everybody out there. And I know you guys, everybody's supposed to be busy, but to not have these things up and running or even checked before putting it out there, and then the solutions to the questions or the answers that you have is ask the principals. The principals is worrying about everything else already as it is. The next year curriculum, graduation, kids are failing. So if we don't have an area that we can send the parents to get good information, then we should have done that before we even hit this point. So that's why, I just sitting here listening to that, sports is great, summer school is great, but if we're not offering enough on the educational aspect of education and them going forward and getting a good education, not everybody's going to play professional sports. Not everybody going to go college for sports. Most of these kids got to be able to read and write and do basic academic problems so that they can make it in life to just even have a job. So I think sometimes it sounds all good or look on paper, looks beautiful. But what if the kid leaves school and he can't even read and write and can't even get a job, can't even fill out an application? That's what we're feeling these kids. The last 2 years of this distance learning, we had no really structuring. All the principals was on their own. It was left holding in the wind, So that's the guidance that we all look to you in getting, and then to call the principal. If that's the case, then we should have the principals on here, not you. Ask the principals what we should do. We're asking you what we should do because the sites are not working. Then you tell us to ask our principals. I don't know. That's just a frustration that I feel that every time it comes down to it, we don't get something solid coming out from you in going forward. It's just a lot of around the merry-go-round, and then nothing get done for our families. And the neighbor islands, they're frustrated, very frustrated. I'm in Eva Beach, and I'm getting neighbor island calls from education, and they want to know these things. And that's the reason why I'm bringing this up, because they tried that. And their principals, tell me how much principals right now you call. Right now, you call on principal as a parent. See if the principal can answer your call. Sasa or somebody else in our office is going to tell you that the principal is busy. He'll get back to you. And by that time happens, summer school is done, the new school is starting. So those are the things and stuff is not solutions. these parents want solid solutions. So please, if you can, work with the rest of the community and try to get some solid solutions for these parents because they're frustrated. Thank you.
Senator, I appreciate the frustration you're sharing. I will say that the school front office teams are doing a tremendous job. And even when schools were shut down because of the COVID crisis, our front office team was showing up to service our parents. And they've done a great job. And so I don't want it to be misunderstood that there isn't yeoman's work being done out of our schools. The state office is not going to answer whether a school is doing something very specific. That's why I say that school parents have to connect with their nexus. Their nexus is the school site. And it's not always the principal that answers that call. It's typically that front office team, and they've done a great job. When there are things that break down, that aren't clear, that we're notified of, we step in. I've gone out personally and visited schools to see what this looks like in action and to see there are things that are going well. Ask the principal, what is it that you still need? How do we help? How do we stay out of your way when we need to stay out of your way when you have things under control? And where do you need more support? The CASs, of which we have 15, go and visit every last one of their schools as well. So we have feet on the ground across all of our schools and work across the tri-level. We are meeting constantly about how do we improve, what came up, what do we have to do, what did we hear. This is really, really high touch, Senator. And so I think everyone is absolutely committed to keep doing things better and better. And there are some great things that have happened, and there are some things that have to be done better and better. The department across the tri-level and our schools in particular are stretched tremendously because not only are they being told that they are accountable for the learning loss, which they are accountable for coming up with solutions, but they are also providing the safety nets. I mean, we have over 5 million foods that we've provided this year outside of the core food services that we provide. We put them into van. We've been problem solving. We didn't have technology across the state. We had no one-to-one program, and we figured it out. We figured out a one-to-one program across this entire state. And networking, we don't do networking, but we bought, and worked with vendors around Wi-Fi hubs. So, with all due respect, because what you're representing is the voices of those who still feel frustrated, we will continue to problem solve and do things better. And I think that every time we get, some specific areas where this is still not working, we're very responsive. We respond right away, and we have a tri-level system that does problem solving. We have teams that do that. We are an action-oriented team. And that's not to say that everything is working ideally, and that's not to say that we can solve all the social safety nets that are needed. That's why we have great partnership with DHS and other providers and after-school providers and so forth, who have been great to work with. But we've continued to problem solve. I mean, when we were concerned about our kids being sad, we stood up a telehealth system that is available for kids to call in. A parent, a teacher could call in. It's all confidential. We said we're not just going to rely on the healthcare system. We're gonna do something really focused on kids. So we've been trying all along to innovate and problem solve, to be responsive. So you have all of our commitment. That's why we like coming to these discussions at multiple levels. We met with the Hawaii Business Roundtable. I know Representative Capella was on that this morning. We're constantly meeting with folks to get everyone on the same page where we need more support for our families and kids to do this well. And we'll keep building it out. You have my commitment, you have the commitment of this entire team. We have a great DOE team that is all hands-on, and we'll continue to listen to the things that aren't working well and respond to them, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that. See, we went from just talking about basic education to food and health and everything. I was just talking about the availability to get in touch with somebody to help them get their kids signed up for education. I understand you guys do a good job with the food service. You guys can reach out to all these vendors. I wasn't asking you for give me a resume. I was just trying to tell you that that's the frustration. I'm not saying the principals and the schools doesn't have a great receiving team. All of that is just, I don't know where you came with that. I'm trying to explain to you that they're trying right now, from here to now, to try to get the kid a little bit more education at the end of the year. They're not worrying about the lunch. That's done already. You did that. I'm not asking you what you did. I'm asking you from now and going forward, how are we going to get these kids enrolled in either summer school or making sure that they're on track for the new school year coming up on academics, not their lunch, not about them being sad. We all know about that. You guys did all of that, fine. But I'm asking about their curriculum. When they're going out there, is they going to be able to spell, fill an application, get a job, that kind of stuff, life learning skills. Right now, I'm not worried about that. You did that. That's fine. But see, you went right off the subject of what I was trying to tell you. I was just asking you is that if they had protocols in place when these things went up to find out if the website and the school's sites was working correctly. That's all it was. I wasn't saying that you wasn't doing a great job, that the principals wasn't doing a great job, and their staff wasn't doing a great job. I'm just asking, when they go out there to reach out, they have somebody to reach out, because just like how you busy, they're busy too. And their priority is their kids, just like how you're saying the priority is the kids of Hawaii. But that's all I was asking, is how they can reach out now. If I want to have my daughter or my son or my kid go ahead and see if they can get extra curriculum for English, because they was not doing that great during the school year, how they can get that kind of connected. That's all it was. But thank you for that whole spiel. Appreciate it.
Okay, members, House members, any other questions? I have a couple other questions. Education, cutting away all decoration, is ultimately about opportunity. And although a vast majority of students will go through the traditional pathways of seeking out ways to get into college or to enter the workforce, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about those kids that choose the pathway of sports, and families and students that utilize sports as a means to get into college, to earn a degree, or even a smaller subset that is fortunate enough to actually go into sports as a actual profession. And so I appreciate what the department is doing with regards to the extended athletic program. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about who qualifies for that program, and how are you going to attract athletes to participate.
Representative, I'm going to hand this over to Phyllis Nubasami. I'm going to step out. Graduation's about to start here and they're waiting for me. So I have a great team on. Heidi Armstrong is on. I don't think any special ed questions were asked, but she's on, and Rochelle Mahoy is on. So mahalo to everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Kishimoto.
Thank you.
So aloha, Representative Woodson. So we have a pilot program, and it is for this year, knowing that many of our seniors didn't get their final season. And so working with the coaches and the athletic directors, they have started what would they call sports camp, helping students that are or 2021 seniors, they're the first priority to do conditioning and workout. So with anticipation that they would be able to try out in their collegiate freshman year for whatever sports. And so that's happening right now. The method for that is through their coach and the athletic director. Who know the athletes and can reach out to them. I don't remember the second part of your question. I'm so sorry, but that's how they're getting notified.
That gave me a little bit of a gist. And so I understand that the point of this program is to help seniors potentially get into college through sports, but in fact, most of the recruiting, if not all the recruiting, has been done thus far already by this point in the season, and athletes are actually transitioning to their colleges. And so would love to know, like, if you took that chronological consideration into into mind, and also uh, this very still unclear as to when you started the program. I don't know if you started it prior to a couple of months ago, which would make sense. But if you're just starting it now, that would mean that all of these kids that are participating in this program will have missed the train, if you will.
So I'm sorry. Okay, so I might have misunderstood. I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question. So it actually started. The schools are very well aware of what the recruiting deadlines are, and we were monitoring that. In early spring, we put out a survey to the athletic directors to find out from them whether or not a couple of things. And I'm not going to remember all the questions that we asked, but we asked about were your athletes able to work out? Were they being helped with their college applications and moving into, were they being scouted? Were they able to create their videos? Recommendation letters, were those requested, and so forth. So we had a way of surveying the schools around that. The second thing was that we also knew that there was a point in time in which the first wave of recruiting offers were made, and then usually a talented athlete would get several offers and scholarships. And then there's another wave that comes in I think it was May, where those offers that were not given, were not accepted, then were offered to a next wave of athletes. So that already happened. What we are doing during the summer months is actually one of the things that the principals talked about, the secondary principals talked about, was that the worry that our students who may have gone a year without conditioning or workout, that we didn't want to move them into a season, even a shortened season, without putting a period of time where they could have that workout. And so we did that in the spring before we opened up the spring season. We also want to be able to do that for students who maybe moving into collegiate sports. They may have been selected for a team, but we want to offer before they leave the island, before they go into a collegiate team, that we would be able to work with them during the summer months to get them ready for the season that may happen in the fall. So it is a way to help our graduating seniors get prepared for their college experience. But we had already done, you're right, we had already done efforts to support the recruiting of our athletes during the spring.
So you did do that. How did you do that?
Yes. That was done usually through the athletic director and the coaches. And again, we did a survey. We reached out to them to find out how that was happening. One of the things we did see was a significant drop in the number. Usually during the season, there's recruiters that come out to watch the athletes play. Of course, that didn't happen. And so that was a drop in terms of recruiters coming onto campus. However, that there still were letters of application, requests for filming, for taping their either their workouts or their practices that showed the level of skill for the athletes. And that was done on request by the athlete.
And were all the athletes aware that that was available to them?
I believe so, because that is the way they do it in a normal year, working with the athlete, the athletic director and the coach. What I was told, because I'm not an athlete, is that while there are great numbers playing high school sports, there are not that many that move into the collegiate arena. And so it seemed like when I was speaking to the executive director that people were aware of it. They were helping the athletes as best that they could. that they felt that they were doing everything they could to support athletes.
All right, thank you. Getting back to the scholastics, and so per slide 8 that you put up with regards to the metrics, how do the metrics that are being demonstrated now compare to a normal school year? And if you can talk a little bit about what types of programs that you're using to help address not only learning gaps or learning loss, but also traditional means in which learning is not happening as it should be in the classrooms with regards to these different types of programs that you're utilizing to help out students in this COVID-19 situation.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. Unmute. So I'm sorry, slide 8, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is speak a little bit more towards that the Q4 ramp up, as we took a look at what was happening around December and looking into Q3, really saw the schools focusing on who are the students that make up these percentages that you're looking at right now. And the schools prioritized in doing our school visits, talking with complex area superintendents and principals, really saw a focus on really classifying who they thought were the students that were vulnerable to failure, and who were the students in their particular school that represented that percentage there. Those were the students that were invited back for in-person learning. Because what we realized is that those were the students that were probably not doing as well on distance learning or virtual learning and needed more attention and more in-person learning. And so that's the first intervention, was looking at the data, and then those were the students that were brought back. And I know Rochelle is on the line too, and basically we had numerous conversations at the leadership level, across the statewide leadership level, around who were the students that we were most worried about given the data that we had. So that was the first thing. Within the schools, I will tell you that one of the things that I was working on with, and Rochelle is a part of this, is really, we got last year a $50 million grant for 5 years for literacy, comprehensive literacy development. 6 of our complex areas received the sub-grant. And with that, there was there's a specific effort and focus around the science of reading for not only at the elementary level, but the secondary level, and it's balanced. And it's a significant amount of money. So many of our complex areas are already working on that. There's also another significant effort around English language learners, and Heidi Armstrong leads that. So 3 of our complex areas went through that. And there's another 3. So what we're trying to do is build out systems, not just trying to address each individual as an instance, but really taking a look at what are the evidence-based practices that we want to see in our schools, and how do we build capacity for it through professional development, and how do we monitor whether those practices are in use, and is it making impact on students. And so those are some of the ways that we're looking at not only building and strengthening the system across all schools, but also taking a look at how are we using those practices to then also address learning loss.
Okay, thank you so much. Additional questions?
Thank you. I just have one follow-up, Deputy Superintendent. In regards to the discussion on the athletes, I guess I need some clarification, because you and I had quite a bit of discussion on this, and including with HHSSA and athletes wanting to return for next year so that they could play their senior year. And it was my understanding that it was the leagues that, did not, uh, agree. And they had some concerns about, I guess the number of athletes that would be on, on the teams, et cetera. But the things that you discussed with the training, et cetera, that you mentioned to Chair Woodson, we had never had that discussion. So what I'm going to ask you, if you could please, send the information in writing as to what was offered to our high school athletes, seniors that were not going to be able to have the opportunity to be seen by the recruiters, et cetera. Again, because what you explained to him was the first that, I'm hearing of it. So if you could send us something in writing, please. And we are running short of time. So unless there are any other questions, Chair.
And Senator, if I can speak to that, because after you spoke to us about it, I did turn around and ask Ray Fugino to take a look at the concern that you expressed, and he did work with athletic directors to come up with this program. So please know that your inquiry actually spurred that conversation that led to the design of this program, and we will get it to you. I'm so sorry that we didn't share it with you.
A surprise to me, and I want to make sure that all the schools and the coaches and we're aware of this. And the reason I'm asking is because I just got a couple of texts by people listening saying that they were not aware, and apparently their students were their children were involved. So thank you for that, Superintendent, Deputy Superintendent, and I will look forward to your feedback. Members, any further questions? If not, thank you very much. And this info briefing is adjourned.